This is Bone Chillers to disturb your dreams. Dare to join us? Click subscribe, ring the bell. But remember, we cannot guarantee your safety from the nightmares that await. Prepare to be thrilled, chilled, and filled with a sense of dread you'll find nowhere else. Welcome to the darkness. We've been waiting.
The Feast of Echoes. The village of Avalea, perched precariously on the edge of a treacherous cliff, was as picturesque as it was isolated. Centuries-old homes nestled amidst sprawling forests, their chimneys exuding spirals of smoke in the chilly air. At the heart of this close-knit community was Lysandra, with beauty that was said to make the morning sun pale in comparison. Yet, as months turned into days, something began to change. First, it was whispers, muted conversations that Lysandra could hear just beyond her earshot. Then voices began to form coherent words, echoing tales of an ancestor, a woman of ravishing beauty, so afraid of losing her youth she consumed human flesh in dark rituals to keep age at bay. Each morning, Lysandra would wake up to find another blemish, another wrinkle. Panic seized her. Could the tales be true? Was she cursed, doomed to see her beauty wane before her very eyes? The more she listened, the more the echoes of the past grew vivid. Hunger. Unending and gnawing, it clawed at her insides. No meal satiated her. She grew thin, her once lush hair now limp, her radiant skin sallow. But the voices were ever present, urging, tempting. Preserve what is yours, they'd hiss. Consume and be reborn. Elias, a young historian with a penchant for lore, noticed the changes in Lysandra. Intrigued, he scoured the village records, hunting for any hint of the chilling tales Lysandra seemed plagued by. In an old manuscript, hidden away in the dusty attic of the village library, he discovered the story of Ilara, an ancestor of Lysandra. The text detailed Ilara's descent into madness and her insatiable thirst for eternal beauty. The hints were clear. The echoes Lysandra heard were not mere figments. They were memories etched into the fabric of time. As Elias pieced together the fragments of the past, the village was swept up in a wave of paranoia. People began to vanish. First, it was old Miss Berwick, a lonely widow who lived at the end of the lane. Then young Tom, who'd gone to fetch water and never returned. Rumours abounded, and fingers were pointed. But it was when Elias chanced upon Lysandra in the woods, her lips smeared with blood, that the horrific truth dawned on him. Lysandra had become a prisoner to the echoes. Seduced by their promises, she sought out the very souls of those she believed would restore her youth. Her once shining eyes now reflected an abyss of darkness. Elias knew he had to act. Confronting Lysandra, he showed her the ancient manuscript, begging her to read Ilara's fate. As she skimmed through the pages, her hand trembling, the realization hit her. Ilara's quest for beauty had left her isolated, feared, and eventually taken by the very village she preyed upon. Determined to break the cycle, Elias and Lysandra ventured deep into the forest, seeking the heart of the echoes, the very spot where Ilara had conducted her dark feasts. There, amid a clearing bathed in moonlight, stood a dilapidated altar, covered in moss and age. With heavy hearts, they began a counter-ritual, using herbs Elias had gathered, combined with a pledge of their love and protection for the village. The air grew cold, and the echoes emerged, manifesting as shadowy wraiths swirling angrily around them. The voices screamed in protest, but as Lysandra resisted their call, their power waned. With a final ear-splitting shriek, the echoes dissipated, leaving the forest in eerie silence. Lysandra's curse was lifted, but the scars of her actions remained. While her beauty returned, she bore the weight of her deeds, choosing to isolate herself from the village she had wronged. Elias, heartbroken yet resolute, took upon himself the task of keeping the tale alive, ensuring that no other soul would fall prey to the Feast of Echoes. Years later, as children huddled around fires, listening to tales of the beautiful woman who walked the woods seeking forgiveness, they'd whisper a prayer for Lysandra, a soul trapped between love and a curse, forever echoing through time. the silent scream. Anna, a 10-year-old with bright eyes and jet black hair, had always been mute. It wasn't that she chose not to speak, but rather that no sound ever came from her lips. Regardless, she'd learned to communicate with her family in her own ways, through writing, gestures, and facial expressions. One cold, foggy evening, Anna's family moved into an old Victorian house on Elm Street. From the outside, the house was an architect's masterpiece, with tall spires, ornate carvings, and stained glass windows. However, on the inside, the air was dense, and the creaks of the wood echoed through its spacious rooms. Anna's first night in the house was restless. In the silence of the dark, her eyes darted to a silhouette standing at the foot of her bed, an entity with hollowed eyes and a ghastly smile that stretched impossibly wide. Paralyzed with fear, she tried to scream, but as always, no sound came out. The entity seemed to revel in Anna's terror. It leaned closer, its eyes fixated on hers. Just as it was about to touch her, it vanished. The first rays of dawn streamed through the window, and Anna found herself alone in her room. The next day, she tried to warn her family. She sketched the entity on a paper and showed it to her mother, but her mother simply assumed Anna was adjusting to the new home and her imagination was running wild. Anna's gestures and panicked expressions were dismissed. As days turned to weeks, the entity made its presence more pronounced. It never harmed Anna, but it lurked around her family, growing closer each night. Anna could see the entity whispering into her younger brother's ear as he slept, wrapping its cold fingers around her father's neck as he read the newspaper, or dancing menacingly behind her mother as she cooked. One evening, as Anna sat drawing in the living room, she witnessed her mother suddenly clutch her chest, gasping for air. Her mother looked around, panicked, but saw nothing. Anna realized that the entity's influence was becoming tangible. It was not just an apparition. It could cause real harm. That night, Anna took matters into her own hands. She decided to confront the entity. Armed with salt and a white candle, things she'd read about in a book about warding off evil spirits, she sat in the middle of her room, the only light coming from the candle's soft glow. Hours passed, and just as Anna was about to lose hope, the temperature dropped. The entity emerged from the shadows, its ghastly smile wider than ever. Anna's heart raced, but she remained determined. Remembering what she had read, Anna formed a circle of salt around herself. The entity seemed hesitant, unable to cross the barrier. Anna took a deep breath, trying to communicate without words. She thought of all the love and protection she felt for her family and channeled that energy towards the entity. The entity recoiled, as if her emotions were a tangible force. It screeched silently, a horrifying sound that only Anna could perceive. With tears streaming down her face, Anna took the candle and threw it at the entity. The moment the flame touched it, the entity erupted into a brilliant light, illuminating the room. Anna shielded her eyes, and when she finally dared to look, it was gone. The next morning, the house felt different. The air was lighter and the dense atmosphere had lifted. Anna's family noticed the change too, but they attributed it to the sunny weather outside. Anna never saw the entity again. However, the memories of those terrifying nights remained etched in her mind. She started taking speech therapy, determined to find her voice. Over time, Anna began to produce faint sounds, and with persistence, she eventually spoke her first word. Her family was overjoyed, believing it was the new environment that had catalyzed this change. But Anna knew better. She had found her voice not because of the new home, but because of the silent scream she had let out in the face of pure evil, a scream that had saved her family and vanquished the malevolent entity forever.
The Garden's Curse. In the quiet town of Draycott, renowned botanist Professor Charles Redford was on the brink of a historic discovery. Deep within the heart of his sprawling garden, hidden amidst a myriad of exotic species, he uncovered a plant unlike any he'd ever seen. It had iridescent leaves, luminescent under moonlight, and blood-red flowers with a pulsating glow. His studies revealed it to be the Eternum florii, a mythical species said to grant everlasting life. Not entirely convinced, but nonetheless intrigued, Charles ingested a single petal. The very next day, he felt invigorated, brimming with vitality. Convinced of the plant's abilities, he hurriedly prepared a concoction for his beloved family, his wife Eleanor, and their 2 children, Clara and Henry. Days turned into weeks, then months, and Charles watched in astonishment as his family seemed to defy the passage of time. Their skin remained smooth, their eyes sparkled, and their energy was boundless. There was just one problem. While they remained ageless, Charles himself began to change. His once sleek brown hair transformed, first into a mossy green, then into tendrils resembling fine plant roots. His fingers grew long and vine-like, twisting and turning of their own accord. His skin began to adopt a woody texture, and patches of green moss speckled his face and arms. Charles became alarmed and delved deeper into his research. He unearthed ancient texts that told of the Aeternum Flori and its terrible curse. While the plant gifted immortality to those who consumed it, the one who discovered and shared its magic would be condemned to become a guardian of the Aeternum Flori, forever bound to the earth as a sentient plant. In despair, Charles locked himself in his study, poring over books and ancient manuscripts, desperately seeking a cure. Eleanor, growing ever more concerned, tried to comfort him. "Perhaps this is a new chapter for us, my love," she whispered. But Charles could see the creeping terror in her eyes, could see the unspoken dread of watching her husband become a part of his garden. Late one night, Charles found a glimmer of hope in a dusty old tome. It spoke of a ritual to reverse the effects of the Aeternum Flori, but it came with a steep price, the sacrifice of the agelessness granted to others. Charles hesitated, torn between his love for his family and the terror of his transformation. In the dead of night, as the moonlight cast eerie shadows over the garden, Charles approached the Aeternum Flori. As he chanted the incantations, the plant began to quiver, its flowers wilting and its luminescence fading. Eleanor, Clara, and Henry, sensing something amiss, rushed to the garden. They arrived just in time to see Charles, now more plant than man, uprooting the Aeternum Flori. With a cry, Eleanor lunged towards him, but the garden seemed to come alive, restraining her with tendrils and vines. The ritual complete, the Aeternum Flori shriveled and died, releasing a burst of ethereal energy that enveloped Charles and his family. Morning light revealed a garden transformed. The exotic plants and trees had vanished, leaving only common flowers and shrubs in their place. Eleanor, Clara, and Henry, now bearing the subtle signs of aging, found themselves in a circle surrounding a magnificent tree at the garden's heart. The tree was unlike any other, with bark resembling human skin and branches that seemed to twist and contort in agony. Upon the tree's trunk they found a face, a wooden, sorrowful visage with an unmistakable resemblance to Charles. Eleanor, tears streaming down her face, touched the tree tenderly. "You sacrificed your freedom for us," she whispered. Clara and Henry, tears in their eyes, clung to the tree, the weight of their father's sacrifice heavy on their hearts. The town of Draycott remembered Charles as a brilliant botanist who disappeared under mysterious circumstances, but for Eleanor, Clara, and Henry, the garden bore a permanent reminder of the man who loved them enough to sacrifice himself and the haunting curse of the Aeternum Flori.
Frostbite's embrace. The skies were growing darker, the biting cold intensified with every passing minute. The Holloways were trapped inside their cabin in the mountains, caught in the blizzard's ruthless grip. On the 3rd day of the storm, Daniel, the eldest son, ventured outside to gather firewood. Struggling against the forceful gusts, he stumbled upon something unexpected, a perfectly sculpted ice statue of a woman. The detail was breathtaking, each delicate curl of her hair, the slight curve of her lips, and the serene expression on her face. Captivated, Daniel decided to carry it back to the cabin, thinking it would bring some amusement to the dreary days. The family gathered around, mesmerized. Who could have carved such beauty in the middle of this storm, wondered Clara, Daniel's younger sister. Their parents, Martha and John, speculated that perhaps a stranded artist had sought shelter and left behind their creation. By the evening, the cabin grew colder. Despite the roaring fire and layers of wool, a deep chill seemed to emanate from the sculpture, enveloping the room. The next morning, Clara was the first to wake up. She found her mother motionless in her bed. Her skin was pale, and a touch confirmed her fears. Martha was frozen solid. Panic set in, and screams echoed as Clara alerted the rest of the family. Their efforts to revive Martha proved futile. The room's temperature continued to plummet, as though winter itself had seeped through the walls. Daniel cast a wary glance at the ice statue, now slightly melted but retaining its form. Its once placid expression seemed altered, with the faintest hint of a smile. An eerie suspicion crept into his mind, but he dismissed it as paranoia. That night, the family huddled together for warmth, their spirits crushed by grief. John decided to sleep beside the statue, mesmerized by its beauty and hoping its presence would provide a distraction from the sorrow. Morning light revealed another frozen figure. John lay motionless, his face contorted in a mixture of fear and awe. Now the connection was undeniable. The ice sculpture was no ordinary creation. The statue appeared even more lifelike, its icy sheen replaced by the soft glow of skin. Its chest rose and fell slightly, mimicking breath. The eyes seemed to gleam with a mysterious light. Daniel decided it was time to get rid of the cursed object. But as he approached, a chilling force gripped him, paralyzing his limbs. Unable to move, he watched in horror as the statue's fingers reached out to touch him. A cold rush flooded his senses, and everything went dark. Clara, witnessing her brother's fate, felt a dread like no other. Alone, she faced the menacing presence of the Ice Woman. The statue's transformation was nearly complete. It stepped off its pedestal, its movements fluid and graceful. Clara could see her family's life force in the creature's eyes. "Who are you?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "I am the spirit of the winter," it replied, its voice cold and haunting. "Trapped in ice, waiting for the warmth of souls to set me free." "Why my family?" The spirit smiled. "Your brother brought me here. I take what I need." Overwhelmed, Clara devised a desperate plan. She lit the fireplace, adding logs until flames roared. Then, taking a risk, she approached the Ice Woman, feigning a surrender. As the creature reached out to embrace her, Clara suddenly pushed it towards the fire. The creature screamed, a chilling wail that echoed through the cabin, as it melted away. But Clara's victory was short-lived. The intense cold the creature had radiated seeped into her bones. With her remaining strength, she crawled towards the hearth, hoping the fire's warmth would save her. Days later, when the storm subsided, a rescue team arrived. They found the cabin eerily cold, and inside, 4 frozen figures. Clara was closest to the fire, a look of determination frozen on her face. Outside, near the woodpile, they discovered the remnants of an ice sculpture, its details washed away. It appeared to be of a woman, arms stretched out as if longing for an embrace. The legend of Frostbite's embrace was born, a tale passed down in hushed whispers, a reminder of the merciless power of winter. Moonlit masquerade. At the edge of town stood the hollow mansion, abandoned for years, its stories whispered in hushed tones. So when the silver-embossed invitation arrived at everyone's doorstep, a mix of excitement and dread filled the air. "Join us under the moonlight," it read, "for a masquerade to remember." Who could resist such an invitation? Lila chose a mask of elegant lace with black feathers. Adam wore one that resembled a fierce lion, and Elise had one that glittered like stars in a night sky. The town's residents donned their masks, intrigued by the promise of a night of mystery. The mansion, which had been decaying for as long as anyone could remember, was now lit by countless candles, with music wafting through its grand archways. The ballroom was alive with dancers, their masks hiding smiles, flirts, and winks. As the night progressed, the initial unease gave way to exhilaration. The wine flowed freely, and the dance floor was a swirl of colors and laughter. But Lila began to notice something strange. Adam, usually soft-spoken, was now aggressive, challenging others to duels, his voice booming. Elise, normally shy, danced wildly, her laughter unnerving. Lila touched her own mask, feeling a slight warmth. To her horror, the edges seemed to be fusing with her skin. Panicking, she pulled at it, but it wouldn't budge. Her reflection in a nearby mirror showed her eyes, once confident, now filled with a haunting emptiness. Around her, the transformation was evident in everyone. Their masks weren't mere disguises, they were becoming their new identities. The room, once filled with mirth, was now a cacophony of madness. A masked man, unknown to Lila, approached her with a sinister grin, his mask that of a raven with a long beak. "Lovely night, isn't it?" he whispered, his voice chilling. Lila backed away, her heart pounding. She had to get out. She made her way to the main door, but it was locked. Others, too, had started to realize the horrifying truth and were clawing at their masks, their nails dripping blood. A woman with a mermaid mask screamed as she was dragged into the shadows by a man with a serpent mask, her cries echoing through the mansion. The masked man with the raven beak appeared before Lila again. "Trying to leave so soon? The night is still young." He chuckled, the sound sending shivers down her spine. "What is this? Who are you?" Lila cried. "The mask chooses you," he said, pointing at the now fused lace and feathers on her face. "And you become the mask. Every moonlit masquerade needs its participants, forever." Lila thought of her friends, her family, all lost to the madness of the masks. There had to be a way out. Remembering an old tale about the mansion, she recalled a secret exit in the cellar. She made her way down, each step echoing in the silent darkness. The cold dampness of the cellar enveloped her, but she pressed on. There, hidden behind a stack of old barrels, she found the exit. With every ounce of strength, she pushed it open and ran into the night. The mansion loomed behind her, its candles flickering as screams of the trapped echoed through the woods. Lila tore at her mask again, and to her surprise, it loosened. She pulled it off, gasping in pain, her face raw and bleeding. The mask crumbled to dust in her hands. Morning broke, and Lila, her face bandaged, led the town's sheriff and his deputies to the mansion. But it stood just as it had for years, abandoned, with no sign of the night's sinister gathering. However, as they were about to leave, the sheriff held up a silver-embossed invitation that read, "Join us under the moonlight for a masquerade to remember." Each year, new invitations arrived, and each year, Lila pleaded with the recipients not to go. But the allure of the moonlit masquerade was irresistible, and every year, under the glow of the moon, the hollow mansion came alive once more.
Thank you for watching, and remember, the darkness awaits. Until our paths cross again, stay fearful and stay subscribed.